If you've happened upon this video, more than likely you're aware of our other channel, The Misery Machine, where we discuss cases that seem more like a nightmare episode of Law & Order SVU than real life. But today's story is real life, and it's not directed by Dick Wolf, but it does involve a dick though. When we hear about crimes that are especially heinous, the normal visceral reaction from most people is the desire to chop off someone's dick. And that's exactly what the young woman in today's story did. Except, she didn't do it while the man was still alive, and she didn't kill him either.
In honor of today's episode, I wore my Run, Willy, Run shirt. While the reference is to a bull that terrorized a small town in Maine in the 90s, I figured it was appropriate since we're talking about...
Don't mention balls. My wife's gonna bite mine off for not being home on time.
In 2001, Charles Roy Rodriguez was charged with SA after he assaulted a 31-year-old woman at a bar in Texas. Rather than getting locked up, he was given 10 years of deferred adjudication, which is a type of probation given by a judge. He reported as a registered offender, since YouTube doesn't like the word, in 2002. Flash forward 24 years to February of 2025, Charles, now 58 years old, passed away from natural causes at a Houston hospital. As you might have guessed, nothing of value was lost that day, and no one wrote him an obituary outside of some vague blogspot post that's clearly been written by AI. The post described Charles as having a kind heart, a generous spirit, and a determination to make a positive impact on those around him, and someone with a passion for learning and self-improvement. I wonder if the woman he assaulted would say the same. Anyway, after Charles's body was released from the hospital, it was placed in custody of Memorial Mortuary and Crematory in Houston and into the care of 34-year-old embalmer Amber Page Laudermilk.
Now, Miss Amber is living my dream. Maybe a few OGs from the main channel might know this, but back in the day in 2002, this is what I was supposed to go to college for. I wanted to help families through the grieving process and to help the deceased look their very best for their final farewell, but surprise, I ended up with Drewby at a sketchy call center where 2 murders happened, and now you have another YouTube channel to watch instead. It's unclear how, but Amber somehow became aware of Charles's background of perversion. Although we've been unable to cite an official source, I did come across a Facebook post that claimed to have some tea. Allegedly, family members mentioned his misdeeds at the funeral home whilst discussing Charles's new wife and daughter from a previous relationship splitting his ashes. Allegedly, Amber decided to take matters into her own hands the only way she could at this juncture. Wielding a scalpel, Amber reenacted a scene from some slasher film, stabbing the recently deceased man in the junk twice before proceeding to go full Lorena Bobbitt. We're all old enough here to remember her, right? But rather than paying homage to old Lorena and discarding the severed member in a field, Amber shoved them down his throat, and I do mean them. She cut off both the pork and the beans. The gruesome act was performed just prior to Charles's scheduled cremation.
According to news sources, Amber wasn't alone in her post-mortem vigilante justice. She carried out the mutilation in front of an embalming student. Moments later, she allegedly told the student, "You didn't see anything." Apparently, this rustled the students' jimmies, and they personally took Amber's surgical prowess to be a threat towards them. It's unknown the gender of the student, but I think if I was in their shoes, I would understand where they were coming from. And so, when the funeral director was loading Charles's body into the crematorium's retort, they conveniently noticed that Charles happened to have something extra in his mouth. After realizing that this likely wasn't a matter of careless oversight during the embalming, they approached Amber, who told the funeral director that Charles, and I quote, had a lot going on with him. She then allegedly placed a towel over his mangled groin. I guess Amber freaked her coworkers out because the incident was reported to the police. It's unclear who exactly made the call, as according to court documents, they were afraid to file a report due to her perceived threats, and assumingly, the safety of their genitals. However, we did find a source that cited a complaint letter from the Texas Funeral Service Commission. Apparently, law enforcement was less than impressed with Amber's handiwork, and at a press conference, Harris County Constable Alon Rosen told reporters this case is about 2 troubled people, the victim who was a registered sex offender and the defendant who was accused of viciously attacking his dead body. No matter what one thinks of his life, the law requires that he be treated with dignity in death. I don't know the suspect's past, but we have the utmost empathy for anyone who has been the victim of a sexual assault or is the family or friend of someone who has been the victim of a sexual assault.
On March 10th, 2024, Amber turned herself into the police, where she was held on a $5,000 bond. She must have immediately posted bond, as a quick search of the inmate roster at the Harris County Sheriff's Office shows that no one with the last name Laudermilk is currently in their custody. She's also launched a GoFundMe campaign to help pay for her legal fees. Amber is reportedly no longer employed at Memorial Mortuary and Crematory. She's had her license revoked and is facing charges of abuse of a corpse. In Texas, abuse of a corpse is a state jail felony punishable by 6 months to 2 years in state jail and a $10,000 fine, and includes acts like trafficking in a human corpse, as well as disinterring, damaging, or treating a corpse in an offensive manner, such as cutting off legs. Now, we're neither condemning or condoning Amber's actions. We'll leave that up to you to form your own opinions, but after reviewing comment sections out on social media regarding Amber's case, it seems that a lot of ladies out there are very pro-Amber and the color of her energy.
Now, we've mentioned Lorena Bobbitt earlier, who is probably the most famous peen cutter of the 20th century, but she wasn't the last one to commit such an act on a living person, just the most famous one. Now, in 2011, 48-year-old Catherine Q. Becker of Garden Grove, California, did something very similar. According to Lieutenant Jeff Nightingale of the Garden Grove Police Department, the woman and her estranged husband, a 51-year-old man known only as Glenn, were going through a divorce, but still sharing their condo. One evening, Catherine fixed Glenn some dinner, but something seemed a bit off, and that is because she poisoned his food. Feeling unwell, the unsuspecting man laid down in his bed, only to wake up a short time later, tied up, with his wife tugging off his clothing. According to Lieutenant Nightingale, the female cut off his penis with a knife, tossed the penis in the garbage disposal, and turned the disposal to the on position. The suspect called 911 and told responding officers that he deserved it. He added that officers arrived and located a male victim tied to the bed and bleeding from his groin area.
In the wake of the attack, Glenn was rushed to UC Irvine Medical Center for surgery and made a full recovery. Sort of. Unlike his predecessor, John Wayne Bobbitt, doctors were unable to reattach his man parts so that he could go on to make naughty films like Frankenpenis. I guess that's just what happens when it goes to the garbage disposal. Due to the permanent disfigurement, Glenn has voiced that he feels like he's been murdered. Catherine was swiftly arrested and charged with aggravated mayhem, false imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon, administering a drug with the intent to commit a felony, as well as poisoning and spousal abuse. She was held in an Orange County, California jail on a $1 million bond. During her trial, the prosecution claimed that Catherine had acted out of rage because Glenn reestablished contact with one of his ex-girlfriends, while the defense argued family violence, which is a really interesting way to label cutting off your husband's dick and throwing it into a meat grinder.
Catherine's attorney, Frank Bitar, also claimed that Glenn, and I quote, demanded sex in ways that caused her pain, adding that his client had a break from reality when she committed the crime. However, Deputy District Attorney John Crystal, who kinda looks like Dave Coulier to me, had another take on the matter, telling reports that this woman went to extreme lengths to destroy this man's manhood by placing it in the garbage disposal. She did this out of vengeance, vanity, and jealousy. And I would have to agree with Uncle Joey here.
Cut it out. Get out of here.
In the end, Catherine was found guilty on April 29, 2013, and was sentenced in June of the same year. She is serving her sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole after 7 years at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, and her next parole hearing is scheduled for September of 2025. I don't know about you, but life in prison doesn't seem to carry the same weight when you could potentially parole in less than a decade.
However, if you thought that's where this all ends, then think again. Like I often do while researching cases, I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole. Apparently, this type of revenge dates back to historical times. Take, for example, this smug diva, Bertha Boranda. She was convicted of mayhem back in 1907 after she attacked her husband with a straight razor. Worried that her husband Frank was visiting a house of ill repute, she hacked off Frank Jr. Thankfully, he was able to make his way to the fire station that he worked at for help. Bertha was arrested disguised in men's clothing, riding away on a bicycle. She expressed no regrets for her actions and admitted to the whole thing and was jailed on a $10,000 bond. She was sentenced to 5 years at San Quentin, which housed women at the time, but only served 2. In the aftermath of the incident, Frank filed for divorce.
Or what about Sada Abe, a geisha who murdered her lover Ishida via strangulation before cutting off his junk and carrying it around with her in her kimono? Now, according to lore, the pair were into erotic asphyxiation, not to be confused with the auto version made popular by many accidental celebrity deaths in the past. While conducting business, which took place at an inn, they'd take turns choking one another with Sada's obi, which is basically a sash to enhance their pleasure. On one such occasion, Ishida took 30 tablets of a sedative called Kamodin because apparently being repeatedly strangled was starting to hurt him. He allegedly told Sada, "You'll put the cord around my neck and squeeze it again while I'm sleeping, won't you? If you start to strangle me, don't stop because it is so painful afterwards." It is interesting to note that Kalmodin has been used in a significant number of self-canceling attempts in Japan, and Ishida took over 30 of them. This is well over the recommended dose. But 2 days later, at around 2 a.m. on May 18, 1936, Sada did exactly what he asked, which killed him. I'm not sure if Sada was surprised by this outcome or not, but hey, I guess it was done with consent, I guess. After lying with her lover's body for a while, she then severed his manhood with a kitchen knife, wrapped them in a magazine cover, and stored them in her kimono for safekeeping. Before she left, she decided to defile his body further. First, she wrote a message in blood on a bedsheet and his left thigh, which read, "Sada Ishida no Kichi Futari Kiri." I'm sure I butchered that, or translated to English, "We, Sada, and Kichi so Ishida are alone." I don't know what that means either. Then she carved the character for her name into his left arm, which we'll show on screen here. And finally, she put on her lover's underwear and left the inn at 8 a.m., asking staff not to disturb him. On May 20th, 1936, Sada checked into an inn under a pseudonym with the intention of removing herself from the earth. She drank 3 bottles of beer, had a massage, and then removed her former lover's man bits from her kimono. For the next few hours, the woman attempted to pleasure herself, later sharing that, "I felt attached to Ishida's Pen 15 and thought that only after taking leave from it quietly could I then die. I unwrapped the paper holding them and gazed at his Pen 15 and scrotum. I put his Pen 15 in my mouth and even tried to insert it inside me. It didn't work, however, though I kept trying and trying. Then I decided I would flee to Osaka, staying with Ishida's Pen 15 all the while. In the end, I would jump from a cliff on Mount Ikoma while holding on to his Pen 15. Sada never got to do any of this, however, as she was arrested at the inn at around 4 p.m. that same day. She was released after just 5 years in prison and became something of a legend in Japan, sort of like serial killer cannibal Issei Sagawa.
But one of the oldest examples comes straight from the Old Testament. Deuteronomy 23:1 states that no one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly of the Lord. So, depending on what you believe, maybe Amber, Catherine, Bertha, Sada, and many other women were onto something.
So clearly this is a very interesting case we have on our hands. And when I look at comments on social media about what Amber did, there seems to be this divide of the dead deserve dignity versus this man deserves no dignity, so she should just be able to do whatever she wants.
I guess that brings up an ethical question of, like, where's the line? Where's the line between, someone here like the gentleman in our story today and someone like Muammar Gaddafi, whose body was like dragged through the streets, or
Saddam
Osama
Hussein.
bin Laden, or Saddam Hussein, or where's the line?
Yeah, this conundrum of when does a corpse no longer deserve dignity? And a lot of people in the comments are saying, well, this man was a convicted sex offender, therefore he no longer has dignity. But this opens up a really dangerous precedent in the death industry if we allow this to happen. And what that means is,
Yeah.
based on personal belief or someone's prior history of trauma, anyone can take liberties with a body. You know, you can just decide, well, I feel this person did actions in life that exclude him from having dignity. People, not even just offenders. And everyone can agree that a offender is a terrible person, but people can start doing this with murderers. People can start doing this with anyone with any type of criminal conviction. Somebody could even do this based on political belief.
They already do, but what the professional thing is to do is to recognize that you yourself have some sort of bias here and that you can't do your job in a professional manner. So we saw that several years back with the Boston Marathon bombings. They couldn't find anybody to take Tamerlan Tsarnaev's body. Like nobody in New England at all would take it. And there was a Muslim cemetery, I believe it was in Virginia, who finally, decided to take him in, which is the responsible thing to do. If you can't do it professionally, say, I can't, I have a bias here for whatever the reason may be, and move on.
And allow someone else to do it. And there actually was a quote here regarding what Amber did from somebody in the death industry, somebody in North Houston, not far from where Amber committed these accidents, from Jason Altieri, who's the CEO of Southeast Texas Crematory. And he wrote, and I quote, "Ethics is everything in this line of work. Whether we have, a particular judgment one way or the other, it doesn't matter. We're there for a family, and we have to keep that in mind." And he further went on to say that these actions that Amber did makes everyone in the death industry look bad.
It does. Another thing, I'm glad he said that, because it brings up a whole point. Like, when you're dead, you aren't really a person anymore. You're just a shell.
Right.
You're literally just a shell. The funeral isn't for you. It's for your family. So at the end of the day, you're not hurting this meat sack. You're hurting everyone around it who has probably nothing to do with it.
Exactly. And I guarantee his family has a complicated relationship with him. At least some of them do. They all must know his past history, and I don't know what it's like to be a family member of somebody who has done something like that. I'm sure that is a very complicated thing that brings a lot of shame to them. I don't think the family feels like justice is done on their behalf or in their family name because his body was desecrated.
Right, because this not only, let's just say they didn't want people to know about this. Now this is in public spotlight in their community.
I mean, it already is public record, but yes, this amplifies it even further. And now this is national news. Your dead relative's body being mutilated, and what he did while he was alive is now national news. And I'm sure that doesn't feel great. The way I would kind of wrap that portion of it up is, I understand that people feel like something needed to be done and that he wasn't punished when he was alive. And I agree, he wasn't. He got probation, and that's on the judge who gave him that deal. Like, mutilating his corpse does nothing to bring justice to victims, nor does it prevent future victimization of people.
Right, and it sets a dangerous precedent with, like you said, I said precedent within the death care industry, because at the end of the day, this is how I feel about it. You might feel a little bit different, but the death care industry, whether you're a funeral director, an embalmer, an undertaker, whatever you want to call that, this is a trade. This is something you should be learning in trade school, things with apprenticeships. But because of the powers that be, it's become this 4-year type of program that's heavily gate kept. So when you can't have this type of trust, it's just going to put up more roadblocks to someone entering that type of industry. And it's an industry that's thankless anyway. You work crazy hours, you're not paid a whole lot, you're on call constantly, you don't know when someone's going to pass away, and it's going to put up more barriers. And that's just my opinion. I could be totally wrong, but that's just something that came to mind.
It's also just the last thing I'll say about this. Imagine if this applied to
pendulum.
other trades. Imagine if you're a doctor and you refuse to treat somebody because of your personal feelings. Imagine you agree to take on a job as a tradesman and you do a terrible job because of some personal bias. Like, this is what this opens up to. So while I personally don't feel one way or the other for this guy getting mutilated, I feel for his family.
I think he's a trash bag with eyes.
Yeah, like, I don't care about him. I care for his family. I feel bad that that happened, but I don't care about this guy. But that's besides the point. That's how I feel about that. And as far as people, because we've seen a lot of people say, hey, I want to donate to the GoFundMe. We mentioned it earlier. I just want to say that we can't fully vet the GoFundMe. There are some people saying it's a scam and some people saying it's legit and they know her. But we can't really sift through the noise here. So if you want to donate to her GoFundMe, do it at your own risk.
Right. There's a Facebook post. I don't know if I want to put it up or not. Maybe we'll put it up. Maybe not. I don't know. But we have some woman claiming to know her who had shared it, and some other woman being like, this is fake. Look up what she actually looks like. And she displayed a picture. So me, because I'm a curious type, went and ran the picture through Google image search, and lo and behold, it's not her. This person's starting drama.
The person that she was claiming she actually was.
This person was like, this is a scam.
Yeah. Well,
and like, that's one thing like that just really bugs me. If you don't like something, you don't have to just call it a scam. This happens across the board with a lot of different things, and it's just silly.
I mean,
just keep scrolling.
Even on the Misery Machine, we've posted GoFundMes for victims' funeral expenses and things like that, which it is a terrible thing if you are a parent and have to have a fundraiser for your child's funeral expenses. And even then, even when it's a vetted GoFundMe and one that we donate to, we still get so many comments being like, this is a scam. There are just people out there that are just miserable that are going to say things like this.
Yeah.
Now,
frankly, it's just really weird behavior.
I agree. And again, this is a much different thing than a child's funeral expenses, but still, with that said, donate to this at your own risk. We couldn't properly vet it. And the final thing,
we're not promoting it.
100%. On the topic of miserable people, I have been noticing there are quite a few comments about the funeral director either being irresponsible or being in on this somehow, because people were saying, hey, why would you check this guy's groin before he went into the retort?
I can tell you. Because this is a direct cremation without viewing. You don't generally go in there with clothes. Like, sometimes you do. Sometimes the family can opt to, like, have you cremated in your favorite outfit. But
or you have a sheet over you sometimes.
Or you have a sheet, or like one of those hospital Johnnies or something of that nature. But he might have just put in there nude.
But even if he wasn't nude, this is the key thing people keep overlooking, and I can't believe people would overlook this. His junk was placed in his mouth. There is no way you're going to miss that.
If you've never seen a person who's passed away, their mouth's open.
So no, the funeral director is not a creep, is not irresponsible, is not doing lewd things with the body. He's literally looking the man in the face who has genitals sticking out of his mouth. I think that would catch anybody's eye.